Hi, everyone, and welcome to the BookFest panel on YA fiction in a time of tumult. And I think everyone can agree that this year has certainly been tumultuous. It's been actually, I don't think a fiction writer could have made this stuff up, the stuff that's happened this year. So let's go to our panel. We've got 5 great authors in all varying stages of careers. We'll go with brief introductions first. Gary, you're the dean of the panel. Let's go with you first. Can you tell us briefly a bit about yourself and your work?
Okay, I'm the dean because I have a little receding hairline, so I'll go with that. I'm Fresno born and raised, and now live in Berkeley, California. I've written quite a few books on for the YA audience and the middle grade audience, and recently I've been doing plays. I live in Berkeley, California.
Thanks. Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley Wisco. I'm the author of a few different novels. These are 2 of them. I write, I would say, highly emotional YA for emotional teens, I guess. And I live in Brooklyn, New York with my family.
Great. I love highly emotional. Romina.
Hi, I'm Romina, and I'm the author of the ZODIAC series and also Lobizona. I was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I immigrated to the States when I was young, and I grew up in Miami, which is where I am now.
Nice. You're heading into nice weather in Miami now.
Oh, yes.
Rebecca, you're joining us from Massachusetts?
Yes, I'm Rebecca Kim Wells. I am originally from the Bay Area as well, but now I live in the Boston area. And I'm the author of the YA duology Shatter the Sky and Storm the Earth, which just came out. And Shatter the Sky is known around the internet as the angry bisexual dragon novel. So that's pretty much it.
Oh, sounds good. And AmyLea.
Hi, I'm AmyLea, as you said, and I'm from Southern California, although I've lived on both the East and the West Coast. I'm an attorney and a mother, but I am proud to announce that I have my debut novel, Fine, which is a YA mystery about 2 girls, and very emotional, very authentic, and kind of looking at what's really underneath the facade we all put on. That's about it.
Great. All right, to start us off, as I said, this is a very anxiety-provoking time. I know some writer friends of mine are writing more, some are writing less, having trouble writing. Has this affected your writing at all?
Yes, absolutely. I guess I'll start. As the panel knows, I was a little bit late because I have a toddler. And not having childcare has definitely impacted my ability to write. Before, he was in daycare about 3 days a week, and so I knew that those were my designated writing days. Now he is home with us 24/7, and my husband still works, from 9 to 5, even though he's working at home. So, since writers don't have set working hours, it's me and Nico all day. So yeah, my writing has definitely been affected. I mean, there's also sort of anxiety and, just like dealing with all of everything that's happening right now that sort of hones in on and affects productivity as well. But I've been trying to be gentle with myself and with my time and with my deadlines.
Right, on top of everything else, the deadlines, yes.
Right.
Anyone else?
I couldn't agree.
Yeah, AmyLea.
Yeah, I was just going to say I couldn't agree with you more because I have 3 children who are no longer at school. They're at home, distance learning, along with my husband and I who work from home. So there are 5 of us trying to fit into various corners of the house to get our work done, and it is kind of a zoo. So it has definitely impacted my ability to write and my sanity, but I guess it's just an exercise in adaptability and resilience at this point. It's at least what I try to tell myself, that if you want to write, you just got to make it happen, even if it's in the middle of the night and, in a corner in the closet, really.
Yeah, it certainly is a test in flexibility and in writers' schedules. I'm a morning writer, so I like to write in the morning, but if something gets in the way of that, you have to find somewhere else to write or whatever. Yeah, you mentioned anxiety. So do you think obviously this is a very anxious time for teenagers and adolescents. They're worried about their future. They're not getting to do things like go to proms or normal high school events. How do you think this will affect them? And do you think there will be more of this kind of a theme in writing for teens in the future, writing about pandemics or just this very unstable environment we're living in?
Yeah, but I think we're definitely going to see this reflected. What's unique about YA is, I always used to refer to it as a genreless genre, where like you can really write anything. What makes a book YA is that the writer must be in conversation with the teen, right? That's it. That's the only difference. It's the only way you distinguish a YA sci-fi from a adult sci-fi, and because of that, we have to, even though a lot of YA's readers are those of us in our 30s, we still have to write with the teen in mind. And I think there's just no way that we're not going to be addressing this in different ways, whether it's kind of symbolic, like sort of allegories about, whole generations that have had to grow up too fast, which we've seen in way worse ways in our history, but obviously that's going to evolve, and the way we fight wars will evolve, and the way we go through moments like these will evolve, and that will 100% be reflected in our books.
Is anyone planning anything like this or writing anything or, for future work dealing with any of these themes?
I'd like to jump in here. I was described, I think, kindly and warmly as the dean of this group. And, I've been writing, my first book came out in 1976. This is poetry, and you were not on the planet. So, I've written about 10 YA books, and what I've done in the last 2 or 3 years have taken some of the themes of these YA books and sculpted them into plays. And the most recent play of mine is based on a novel called The Afterlife, which is about teen murder, teen suicide. And I took that theme, and I was commissioned to take this theme and based it, a new play on an old novel. So I think, as someone mentioned, evolution is that you will get at an age where you will want to experiment in other genres or other forms, taking perhaps your YA material. And this is what I've been doing. Along that line, I have a novel called Buried Onions. It's set in Fresno. Not a real pretty picture in this this regionalist novel of mine. But we're also, transforming it from a YA novel to a film. And that process is really interesting, this independent film, making it, I think, at a high caliber. So seeing how this is moving along is kind of interesting and scary as well.
Yeah, I love Buried Onions, by the way. That's how I came to know Gary's work, and so I can't wait for that film to come out. Yeah, anyone else see these themes as possible themes of real life coming out in their fiction?
Yeah, I was a preteen when 9/11 happened, and not that I would equate the two events, but I do think that both of them are going to change the world and how we move in it in profound ways that we haven't quite figured out. I mean, 9/11, we have, that's 20 years ago now, but I think the pandemic will be equally affecting. And I think that is going to come out in writing, both thematically and possibly literally. I did see a review pop up on Twitter recently where the person reviewing the book said, "I'm disappointed this takes place in 2020 and I didn't see any mention of the pandemic. This is unrealistic." And this person, of course, they don't understand how publishing timelines work. But also it was like, it is such a big event that I think it's going to be a weird decision to make going forward. Like, do you include it? Do you not include it? What do you include? It's such a fast changing thing. And that's something that I think everyone is thinking about, both teens and authors.
Yeah.
I think
it does appear like you glossing over it. It's sort of like World War II. It affects everybody. So there's going to be maybe a whole canon of work about the pandemic. Ashley, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say maybe I am like the only one, but I'm going to pretend like it's not happening for as long as possible. As far as when it comes to my writing, just because I have zero desire to write about it at all. And I mean, I feel like once we're further out of it, like, I don't know, 10 years from now, when the effect of it is clearer, and the long lasting sort of, I don't know, the things that are left, remnants, I guess, the long lasting remnants are more clear, I think then I would be able to approach it from a fictional standpoint. But I don't know. I really don't see myself addressing it or talking about it at all in upcoming novels, at least for a couple of years, just because I feel like it's such a huge thing that it would almost be hindering to telling a story, to telling the kinds of stories that I'm interested in telling. But maybe I'm the odd one out.
Well, I think you need time to process it too, and I think art sort of comes after the fact when you try and make sense out of everything and process it, and then you get sort of the art coming out of that. And what about the other big thing of the year, of course, is our anti-racism protests, and a lot of young people have been involved in that, and very active in that, and it's really young people have driven that whole movement. What about protest themes? And do you think that will we get more sort of protest literature or literature addressing racism, anti-racism going forward?
Well, I think there already has been so much, and there will be more. But, I mean, of course, The Hate You Give being like the huge one from a couple of years ago, but that was at like the very beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've had so many. Nick Stone's written about that. Jason Reynolds written about that. It's already here, and it will continue to be here.
No,
Well,
go ahead.
I'm gonna jump in here. Just I mentioned my novel Buried Onions, and we're working on the script right now. I am not writing the script, even though it's my novel, but the scriptwriter named I'll keep his name private, but he wanted to work in the Black Lives Matter moment, into the script, and it felt false. We could capitalize on this. It's not like it wasn't insincere. He really wanted to paint a portrait of what police are like in my hometown of Fresno. Sometimes not very good in Fresno. And I said, I just think it's going to date the film, and it's something very false. And so we really have to, as writers, pick up whether or not we are meaningful in the literature we write when we have a pandemic or Black Lives Matter or the environment, really whether it's close to your heart, as opposed to simply just using it as a thematic issue that might sell books.
Yeah, just sort of a gratuitous mention of it to make it seem timely or topical or anything. Anyone else on that? Amy?
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think this, at least my hope is that this is an opportunity for authors all over to sort of incorporate the emotional truths that we're experiencing in all these areas. Because, regardless of what the context is of our books and the characters and their struggles, I feel like the anti-racism movement, the pandemic, and all of the issues surrounding it are affecting everyone in a variety of ways. And from, mental health to, societal change, I think everyone is feeling very uncertain and disempowered. And I think this is an opportunity for authors to really incorporate a sense of power, especially with teen readers, who are looking, forward to their futures without any idea of how things are going to unfold. I think it's so important for them to see characters and to have, authentic voices in literature that promote, the idea of courage and resiliency in the face of uncertainty. And I think that, all the things that are happening now, when people feel so powerless, it's an opportunity for us to really build up our characters and our situations and not necessarily give the answers, but give hope and give encouragement that we all can weather the storm, we can find better solutions, and we can move forward to a better place. So I think whether, the context involves these events, either now or in the future, like you said, when we've had a chance to process them, I think the more important part is that, what we're learning, what we're experiencing as humans gets incorporated into, the emotional truths of our stories. And I think that's where readers could really benefit from even our stress and anxiety, and just reflecting that back as just a human experience we all share.
Yeah. And just sorry. Did you want to say something?
No, you can go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback onto that a quick thing about the whole idea of protest literature and everything. But you were, I love how you said about kind of taking our power. And I think that just the fact of more own voices, stories being published alone is a protest, and it is taking back our power. And I think that it's equally important that these stories are important, and it's important to highlight the strife and everything that everyone goes through. I mean, I just wrote about an undocumented girl, so obviously I'm writing these stories, but I think it's equally important to find the joy in every culture, and to not just make every marginalized character have to represent the strife of the entire culture. That's a lot to carry, and we've been there and we've been doing that, and that's not changing anything. I think what's changing it is if we say, we used to hear from publishers like one of my good friends who's an author, once she tried to get one of her books published, she heard from the publisher, oh, we already have an Indian author on our list. It's like, well, but I'd like to know how many white men here, we already have a white man on our list, or or a white woman, we already have, let's be honest, and so it's like, this is, as long as more of our stories are being published, and not just that, but as long as we have more nuanced characters and stories that are more representative of the real kids out there, then I think we will be protesting and we'll be keeping this alive, and we won't let this become a trend or a fad or a moment, which is my big fear. Like right now it's Latinx or Hispanic Heritage Month, choose your label, and it's like everyone's, talking about books right now, like Lobizona, that are coming out right now. And I mean, it's really nice and I love it, but I want to know, are we going to be talking about these books next month and next year, because that would be the real rebellion.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I think in a way, depending on what you're writing about, everything that you write is a protest, especially, me personally, as a Black woman, if I'm writing a story about a Black girl who is happy, who is sad, who is angry, who is experiencing sort of the breadth of her emotion and is existing in the world, as a person who has worth and whose life matters, I think that in and of itself is a protest. And so I'm just going to keep writing my cinnamon roll Black boys and my sad Black girls and my angry Black girls. And yeah, I feel like that is as protesty as I'm going to get personally. But yeah, those stories, as Rebecca said, those stories exist and are going to continue to exist, the ones that are literally about racism and the fight. But I think there is a lot to be said about stories that just center characters of color.
I totally agree. Oh, thank you so much for saying that. That's also something that I've been holding on to, like going back to the first question about how have you been writing during this year of a lot of upheaval, and going back to I can't do literally everything that there is to do, but I can write books with characters who look like me. I can write books featuring queer characters finding joy where they are not encountering like a lot of persecution because of that. And sometimes it feels like that's really not enough, but I have to really try to remind myself that it is.
It's enough.
Yeah.
So, along those lines, should white writers include characters of other backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, racial backgrounds, or lifestyles in their books? And how can they do this authentically? Or should they even try?
I suppose this is for me. I think, yes, I do. I think that there's value in bringing a diverse cast into any story, because that's reflective of the lives we live, and I think doing it authentically is tricky, because I think you write what you know. And I was actually thinking about this ahead of time, and I was thinking it would be a wonderful thing to see more white authors talk about their experiences of these issues. And I think it would be very powerful to see, implicit bias play out in these stories and have, a transformation occur, if you will, right? Because I think there's so much focus on one side, but the reason, we have such extremes is because there's polarity, there's two sides. And I think having, stories that really flesh out the real life experience of this on everyone's, in everyone's lives would be very powerful, rather than, only having these stories play out, with what we want to see change, but why isn't it changing? If that makes sense. Because I think, I just think it's really hard to talk about the difficult subjects because they're difficult. And it's easier, I think, to just, put a name or a description into a character to make it seem authentic. But then I think, like Gary was saying, that runs the risk of being, disingenuous and not really being authentic and fair to what that experience is really like firsthand. So I almost think that it would be great to not only have more diverse characters and include all of that in writing too, but also to flesh out the experience of, white people in this world, in relation to that. And I think that would be very powerful. I mean, to me, because it is coming from a place of what you experience and kind of putting all of the cards on the table of, because I think, in my life, I don't know if it's true for everybody, there's always somebody in your life that, they're wonderful, they're the sweetest grandma, they're, volunteering at the soup kitchen, and then they say something and you're like, what? I did not see this part of your personality before now. And that would be a really complex and interesting discussion to be having when, we kind of put all of our humanity out on the table with all of its flaws, in our characters, and watch them sort of struggle. Because I think that's where we're at as a society, is we're struggling to be better, to change the conversation. So I think that would be a really helpful and productive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's two arguments to this, or there's two sides, I guess, to this argument. And I feel like one side is the stay in your lane argument, the taking up space argument, the fact that if, someone who is not of a certain culture or of a certain experience and they're writing that experience, they might get a spot that is taking a spot from someone else who might be able to write the same story more authentically. And then the other side of the argument is the you should be able to write whatever you want argument. And I think that I'm sort of in the middle when it comes to those. Like, I definitely see and have seen, I worked in publishing for 10 years, so I definitely have seen the whole stay in your lane situation where someone who should not necessarily have been the first or the voice of a certain character gets a spot, and then later on, someone of that background or someone with that experience is denied the opportunity. But at the same time, I personally have written outside of my experience, so I feel like I can't be like, no, don't do that. I think that you should be able to write whatever you want, but you should be doing it well, and you should be doing it with care, and you should only be doing it if it serves your story, right? And I think the other thing that people don't always don't always take into consideration when they're writing is, you know, as writers, we get hundreds of ideas, right? If we're lucky, we get lots of ideas all the time. All of those ideas are not books. All of those ideas are not stories that we are going to end up telling. And all those ideas are not always stories we should be telling, right? So I think that when a writer gets an idea for a character who is not the same as them in a lot of ways, they should sort of pause and ask themselves, like, is this my story to tell? Why do I want to tell this story? I feel like an example is in my first novel, The Beauty That Remains, I have a character who is Korean, a main character, a POV character who is Korean and adopted. I am neither of those things. But I was writing a story about grief, and I really wanted to show a character who felt isolated in more than one way. Not only is she isolated because her best friend died, but she's also isolated because her family doesn't look like her, because there are things about her friends that they don't understand about her. And so it was sort of these additional layers that I wanted to add to my character. And that was why I ended up writing her, right? And then I hired and paid Korean adoptees to read it and tell me, what am I doing wrong? Like, have I done anything? Is there anything I need to fix? Have I said anything that's inauthentic or offensive, you know? So I think you should be able to write whatever you want, but you should do it with care, and you should check your work. And at the same time, like, ask yourself that question: why am I writing this character? Or
I love that question. I love that whole examine your motives and like why you want to tell this story. And I also want to say, like, having, you know, an authenticity reader is so important, you know, and I do think, like, we hear sensitivity reader and we get a little weirded out. Like, there's some people they get like defensive, and I actually completely disagree. I think it's a beautiful thing because, like, own voices, identities, marginalized identities, like, nobody is a monolith. Like, you know, I'm not speaking for every single Argentine immigrant. That would be nutty for me to even think I could attempt that, you know? And so I definitely had, you know, I hired a sensitivity, authenticity, or whatever you want to call, like, for somebody else to read it, because the more, and then I had family members, all of my different, you know, with all their different immigrant stories read it, because it is like, if you're afraid about to get someone's input on your story, especially someone whose experience is more similar maybe to the character you're writing than your own. I think what Ashley said is perfect. It's like, examine why you're so defensive about it. Why about it presents a threat to you, you know, because I think it really, it adds value to just get more input, because we are all unique.
I'm going to jump in here. I think what Ashley said was brilliant. I want to add this, is that when you have characters, you have to bring some complexity to that character. I don't, you know, I've written a lot of short stories in which Mexican-American kids are featured. Every one of them has flaws. I can't think of any character in adult literature that doesn't have a flaw or flaws. So that we have to have complexity to the characters. I have a story called Sorry, Wrong Family, in which a girl named Carolina, she realizes that she belongs to a family that doesn't have any manners as an etiquette. So it kind of like, we add a complexity. I have another story about a girl who has a Barbie that's headless. And so it's a very kind of chilling story, but also it's been received very well. So I think that if you have say in this case, a Mexican-American character who's perfect, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it at all. And so you have to look at characters that are, again, just to repeat myself, that are imperfect.
Yeah, beyond skin deep. All right. Are any of you, how do you identify race in a sensitive way in your books? Let's face it, I mean, so white becomes the sort of default character. And if you don't identify the race of a character, you kind of assume they're white. That's kind of the default thing. Should people be identified racially or, you know, in some other way when you're writing a diverse cast of characters?
I think people should just say it. I think I feel like when you try to get like super, I don't know, flowery about it, or if you try to like describe what somebody looks like without saying their race, sometimes it's just confusing, or sometimes you run the risk of like saying the wrong thing or describing it in a way that might be offensive. So I kind of think like people should just say it. Just say like, oh, like, you know, I walked over to Ashley. She's a Black girl with braids. Like, I think that's fine.
Well,
I don't know. That's just my opinion.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't write realism, so, you know, my opinion is maybe not as important. But it's like, it's not offensive to say, oh, I'm a Korean American person. Like, there's nothing offensive about that. Therefore, there should not be anything like offensive or like touchy about just saying that in your fiction. Yeah. Writing fantasy, of course, it's different because like the groups in my books are not exactly correlated to like, you know, real world groups. But I do have like different cultures in my books and I identify them as such and talk about, you know, this person is from this group and this is like the differences in culture between them and this group. So, you know, I do come out and say it in a fantasy context.
Yeah. I also think it might be a craft question because like, there are ways of describing people that fit the narrator that would make sense in the context of your story. You know, if someone is really into, I don't know, design or colors or art, there's a certain way that a character like that would describe someone versus just like a regular, you know, person walking down the street. So maybe it's also like a question of craft or a way of sort of easing it in there. Like I think in The Beauty That Remains, when I describe the Korean American character, I say something like, you know, my friend helped me look up how to do makeup on Asian faces or something like that. Like I said it, you know, something like that. And then like, you know, she was showing me how to do certain things on my eyes. Like I described, but I still said like that she was Korean. Or I think I also described her sister as having the same haircut as like her favorite K-pop star. Like some, you know, things like that. Like right. I feel like there are other ways of like working it
in. Yeah. Are any of you working with alternate storytelling platforms? I know Gary mentioned film, but a lot of is coming out on fiction, on podcasts, graphic novels, audiobooks. Also, I don't know whether they're big with young adult readers. Just anything about you know, what your experiences with these alternate storytelling platforms, or these some that are like bite-sized, little serialized web stories also. Have any of you written for those?
I would love to enter that world, but I don't know anyone who's doing it.
Right, that's what I was wondering, how if it was taking off in the young adult market, or it seems to be mainly adult fiction.
I don't know about that, but audiobooks definitely, you know, that's been a big thing. And actually with Lobizona, what's so awesome is we cast an own voices narrator who's from Argentina living in New York. And I was super excited. I kept insisting I wanted her. It was her first like, you know, audiobook gig, anything. But I was like, I know this is the voice for Manu, who's the character. And then we lose her because she doesn't have papers, and like she's on one of the like a working visa, something that where like it, because of the situation and this administration and everything, she should have been okay, but she wasn't. And when all this COVID stuff started happening, they just wanted her out of the country, and so she had like it was a mess, and she had to get on a humanitarian flight, and nobody could really track her down, and it was the whole. And so they were trying to recast, and I'm like, I will never recast. Like, this is her. Like, this will be my last stand, you know? And so we kept trying, and we finally did. And she knocked it out of the park. We found a studio in Argentina, and like the audiobooks team at Macmillan, just like, they are amazing. They just did not give up. They got her in a studio. And I mean, now she also did Furia, which is also about Argentina, and was the Reese Witherspoon book club pick by Shamin Mendes. So it's like, it's sort of so cool, you know, to see this incredible actor, you know, rise and all this stuff. And then she has such a similar story to Manu that she said when she was reading this, it really hit her hard. I mean, these weren't just words to her, you know, and that fear of ice and all of this stuff was so real, and you hear it in her voice, and it's just so powerful.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
she was able to bring a lot to the story. That's great.
Yeah.
I think with audiobooks, it's also a question of accessibility, because for some young adult readers and for adult readers as well, like people who have learning disabilities or, you know, dyslexia or, you know, different things like that, audiobooks just provide a level of access that otherwise they would not exist for people like that. And I think also, like, as a new mom, like, I've been pretty much consuming audiobooks exclusively. I can't remember the last time I actually finished a print novel in the last 6 years. So I also just like really enjoy audiobooks. And then there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, after when the pandemic first happened, Audible released a bunch of children's audiobooks for free. And so they have like this library that is available. And I know lots of parents who have been using that to sort of keep their kids occupied or add another layer of, you know, sort of like a learning and educational sort of element that, you know, now that parents are sort of having to do a lot more, that I know has been really, really helpful. And they have YA novels on that as well as like younger novels.
Ashley, what group was that allowed the free audiobooks? Or
on Audible, if you just go to audible.com,
okay.
Yeah, they have like a whole library. I'm pretty sure it's still up. I know it was there in like the spring, April and May. I saw it, but I assume that it's still there. But there was like a whole list, a whole library of things that were free. And then there was also some stuff that is open source. So all of that stuff was there as well. But that had already been there, but they sort of collected everything that was free and available into like one little library so you could scroll through everything.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, on Audible. They had a whole collection of stuff for children.
Well, I have about 12 or 13 books on recorded, they're either CDs or tapes. My royalties on these are just pathetic. Like $22, $13 for a year. So I don't know how our other authors are doing in that arena, but I don't know if anyone who's reading books by tape or CDs, or I'll even date myself, cassettes.
I think that they're digitizing a lot of them so that it's easier for people to access them, like on their phones or on their laptops or whatever, on their devices. So they're digitizing. I've seen the actual CDs and stuff like that at the library, but I think a lot of the audiobooks they're digitizing them now. Even the ones that are still on CD, still available on CD, they're digitizing them so they're in the library.
Are writers getting paid for this?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I mean, I can tell you that at least for mine, Simon & Schuster had the audio rights, and they sold them to an audiobook producing company, which has been very great. That company's been fantastic to work with, but they paid a fee to buy the rights. So I got part of that. I haven't seen any statements beyond that. So I have no idea how they're selling, but I got paid some money for it. And I think the production's been really good. I've been really happy with them. And they are available in CD and digital download. But I wanted to say, I personally am not like producing alternate formats of storytelling, but I'm also a bookseller. And what I can tell you about graphic novels is that they've just exploded over the last couple of years. Kids are just gobbling them up. So that's a great format. I love them.
Yeah, which also speaks to some kids have reading problems, or they're just more visually oriented, especially today. And they like seeing the pictures, in the little bubbles of text and go along with that. I wanted to ask, I think both Romina and Gary have had their works translated into Spanish, and I believe Gary into other languages, and maybe Romina, maybe others. How is the Spanish language market for young adults, or how do you?
For me, I don't know about Romina, but dismal, very bad. It's in the category of $23, for half a year of a sales on a particular book. I've had books translated into Italian, Korean, French, Spanish. I can't think of the other language, but it's not, and maybe it's just my work, but it's not been good.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, Latin American countries are going through it and have been for a while. And, I remember going to speak at the Feria del Libro in Buenos Aires a couple of years ago. And there were a couple of bloggers who had just flown in from Venezuela when everything was going down. And it was just so wild because they were looking at books and they're like, we don't have books. We don't have books. And so they were just whatever we could give them or taking back because and my publisher wasn't releasing books to the stores in Venezuela because they weren't paying them for anything. And so they couldn't anymore. So it was you're there as the author, you've got the publisher, almost they've got these readers and the other, and you're like, well, I cannot do anything. I literally cannot make a country better so that all the children there can read. It's mind blowing. And this is my parents left Argentina after the Guerra Sucia. So I know this is stuff that it's in cycles, and for some reason it gets really hard to create a real big market. I found that in Mexico, it's a little better, the market, the other thing you have to realize about Spanish is there's going to be different editions and different versions of Spanish, so there's always the Spanish, for Spain, then there's the, and sometimes there's even a special one for Mexico. I know that in Zodiac in Mexico we went with a couple of changes. So it's everything is very different. So, that's the other thing you have to contend with. I'm more curious about the Spanish market here in the States. How, and I don't know enough yet, and I certainly, Dean Gary is making me think I need to be looking at my royalty statements more because I'm always like, oh, I made something, yay! Someone else read a book, I just and now I'm I should be really studying because the Zodiac series is in 9 languages. I don't know how well it sells in one country versus another. I do know that of the 9. English must be one of those 9. So of the 8 it got translated into, Spanish was the only one that translated all 4 books in the series. France made it to 3 and then they just didn't do the 4th. So it's that I will say that it clearly was selling well enough that they came back to buy, the other books. And I'm curious how it'll do with Lobizona, particularly as it's such a Spanglishy book. I'm very curious how that will go. And I was able to get the same translator who worked on the Zodiac series to work on this book, and she's fantastic. So if anyone does need a Spanish translator, I got your girl.
When I was working in publishing, we often went to library conferences and things like that. And something that came up a lot was the need for, especially with picture books, the need for English Spanish, because it allowed parents who might not speak English to read the story to their kids, and for the kids to be able to follow along in both English and Spanish. And so that came up a lot. And whenever my publisher was donating books to various organizations or whatever, that was always something that was high up on the list. Were those English Spanish editions of stuff. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, which is easier to do with a picture book than
right, much easier to do with a picture book.
Right. Yeah, but that is true. Bilingual books are very they're big. Yeah. So just to lastly, what if we can go around and say what everybody's working on now and what's your future projects? Starting with Romina, what are you working on now?
Mine's really easy. I got the sequel to Lobizona, which is called Cazadora. And I'm just finishing that up, and that's coming out next year.
Wow, exciting. Is there going to be future more than one sequel? Is it a series, or you think it's just going to be a 2-book?
I did it as a duology. After doing a 4-book series, it was fun. I loved it. But, you do see, like, it gets harder to kind of promote and publish and sell like a 3rd and 4th and 5th, because the person has to have read the first one. So there's like a smaller rate of return on it, like it just gets to a point where I'd rather stop here, see how it goes. And I do want to mention, I'm also working on a story for an awesome Latinx anthology put together by Zoraida Cordova, and it's called Reclaim the Stars, and it comes out I think late next year or early the following. So, and look out for more stuff about that. But it's we're talking about kind of empowering voices, stories, and everything, and this is going to be a book that's going to be very Spanglishy, and just very unapologetically Spanglishy.
Great. AmyLea, what are you working on after your debut?
Well, yeah, that's pretty much taking a lot of my focus right now, because it comes out this November 17th. I'm very excited about that. Well, you can get your copy.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Very excited. And so when I'm not focusing on getting that out the door, my next story is going to be about a girl struggling with her identity, being a foster child and then adopted. So kind of similar to what Ashley was talking about her characters, kind of going through that struggle and what it means to be who you are, nature versus nurture, and just self-determination. So it's really exciting. I'm excited to, get that done and move on and see what's next.
Yeah. Rebecca, what's up?
So I have theoretically 2 things coming next year. The first one is a standalone YA fantasy, and that's called Briar Girls, and it's about a girl who is cursed to kill anyone that she happens to touch. Kind of like what's going on in our times, although, I started writing it in 2013, so I was ahead of the trend. Anyway, so it's about her and what happens when she realizes perhaps there's a way to break the curse. If you like my other 2 books, you'll probably like this one. It's dark, twisty, queer, all that good stuff. And then I have a short story coming in a totally opposite anthology, Fools in Love, which is edited by Rebecca Potos and Ashley Herring-Blake, and it is all rom-com tropes. So that'll be fun, and I think it's scheduled for December of next year right now.
Yeah, that does sound like fun. Fun to write.
Yeah.
What's coming up for you?
So, in September, the first 2 books in my first series came out. The series is called Fly Girls. And these, I should say, are super, super short, so really good for reluctant readers or for tweens who read up. And each book follows a different girl in this friend group, the Fly Girls, who attend a art high school in Harlem. So the first one is Lux, the new girl. This is Micah, the good girl. And then next year, the last 2 will come out, Noelle, the mean girl, and Tobin, the it girl. And then next year, I'm also in a couple of anthologies. One hasn't been announced yet, but it's going to be super exciting when it is announced. And the other one is called Battle of the Bands. And it's just a bunch of short stories about a Battle of the Bands competition. And each story follows a different band or a different person involved in the show. So it's really cute. I love writing about music. If you've read my first novel, it's all about music. So it was nice to sort of dive back into that. And I think that's it for now. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot on your plate.
Oh, wait. I'm writing a Barack and Michelle Obama biography that is also for young adults, and that should come out at the end of next year as well.
Wow,
that's awesome.
Nonfiction is a whole, young adult nonfiction is a whole other,
It's my first try. It's hard.
Yeah. Gary, what's on your plate? You mentioned plays.
It's a very small plate, I have to tell you. But I just want to say that the energy from the other writers, panelists, It's kind of encouraging. You know, I listen to all of the young writers here, and I go, wow, my gosh. So, what am I working on? It's maybe I have never learned, but I'm working on a film script, not the one that I described earlier. This one's called Oranges, the movie. I have the most anthologized poem in contemporary literature, and this is a poem called Oranges. You can go online, look at it. Oh yeah, I might remember that poem. But so I decided to take this poem, Oranges, and make it a family comedy, romance, in which a boy, of course, in this case, likes a girl, and the girl doesn't like him. And so it's very simple story, but that's what I'm working on. And if anyone knows any people at Nickelodeon or someone like that, I'd like to hear from you. But that's on my plate.
That sounds really cute.
It is. It's
Yeah, and again, it speaks to like sort of reusing, taking another storytelling platform for, content that you already have and sort of using the same thing into a different.
Christina, you're describing it in a very positive way. In other words, you could have said rehashing old material, but you didn't do that.
No, I mean, you have such a breadth of experience and books out there. Like, you have so much.
So
right, exactly.
Well, everyone wants to, have a his or her novel, made into a movie. I mean, that way can be kind of an exciting adventure in your life, and I'm trying that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I'm working on a mystery book myself, mystery novel. I'm on my second draft, so it'll be slightly, not really adult, but slightly above, young adult, slightly above. The main character of the age is 21, so it's like in this weird, I tend to go for that weird in-between young adult and full adult area, like new adult, but I think that's
new adult,
kind of new adult, but anyway, that's sort of the thing. So, well, great. Well, thanks very much for everyone for participating. It's been a great panel, really interesting and great contributions to this. I hope the audience gets a lot out of it. And we'll see you next time. In the meantime, you can hold up our books if we've got them, and see you later.
I don't have a book.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Lovely.